Wow. Okay.
And as far as I'm concerned, he can stay there. So they got a new guy in who they said is really a good guy. Well, there was Obama had a grant out for take your street lights to solar
Yeah.
instead of using electricity. Let the solar. If it was a bad day or there was snow, they would kick on if if they hadn't been regenerated. And I talked to this guy and the second mayor, and he said, "Why do you want to help the blacks?" That was what he said to me. And I said, "Well, number one, I will tell you when I was a kid, Hal Holbrook came to my school when I was overseas, and he gave us a story. And what he said was true. To begin with, he didn't even know who Hal Holbrook was. Do you know who that is? That was an actor.
Mm-hmm.
He used to go around and do talks. Well, he would take like Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn, and he would do parts of the book.
Yeah.
And you want me to tell you this story? It'll blow you away.
Sure.
Okay, I hope you're sitting down. And I told this guy, I said, why do you say that? And he said, well, there's a big difference between black and white people. And I said, okay. He pissed me off about this point. And I said, there is no such thing as a white person unless you're an albino, which would mean you would have pink in your eyes. Except Anderson Cooper. And Anderson Cooper puts contacts in. I don't know if you know he's an albino.
What? Are you serious? Didn't know.
Serious. And the only way you can tell it is, I guess, people have told me he has some pinkish in his eyes.
What?
And that's why he wears colored contacts.
I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. I watch Anderson Cooper on CNN.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I watch him a lot. Wow. I just found out that he was gay just about a few weeks ago. I didn't know that.
Yeah, he doesn't tell anybody. He just goes about doing his business.
Okay.
And I said, and Hal Holbrook said to the class, after he got done with the interpretation, well, we were all in the auditorium, and he said to this kid behind me, who happened to be white, he said, what color are you? And the kid said, white. So he looked at another kid across another part of the auditorium, and he said, and what color are you? Mind you, we're in Saudi Arabia. That's where I grew up. My dad was in the oil business. And he says to this other kid, what color are you? And very proudly he says, I'm black. And he said, oh, you two come up on the stage. And he got up there and he reached on this table behind him, and he had a piece of white poster board and a piece of black poster board. And he put the white one up to the white kid and said, is this the color you are? Kid says, no. Okay, remember that. He said to this other kid, okay. Put the black poster board up and said, is this the color you are? And he goes, no. Does my mother know this? Because this is a mom who had always told this child to you're black and be very proud of it. Which is fine. So he took this big laundry basket behind him and dumped it on the stage floor and said, had every shade of brown you could think of. And he said, you find the colors you want, and I'm going to tell him another excerpt, and then we'll be back to you. So after the excerpt was over, they go back and they said to this, quote, white kid, and he said, okay, what color what are you? And he said, I'm a very, very light brown, light tan. Holbrook looked at him and said, yes, so you are. And he said to this other kid, what color did you find? He held up this very, very dark brown piece of paper. And he said, I'm very dark brown. He says, I'm like Hershey's chocolate. He said, does my mother know this? And Hal Holbrook handed him the black piece of poster board and said, you take this home and you can educate your mom.
Yeah, but, that's just the color of his skin. But
No, that's why they were referring to, because that's why we refer to people. So Hal Holbrook said to them, there is no such thing as a white person unless you're an albino, and there's no such thing as a black person. He said, everyone is a shade of brown
Mm-hmm.
depending upon where their origins are to the equator.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I have told that story more times, whether I'm teaching Black history over in Montbello here, which is a primarily African American community, or where it is. And I will tell people that story. And I have a good friend of mine who's African American, and she will say she'll wear like a black shirt to work. And she said her daughter said, "Mom," and she says, "No." She says, "The shirt is black and we are brown. There's a difference."
Right, but you
And
know.
I love her to death because she just calls it like it is, you know. And I thought, you know, if everybody understood they're all various shades of the same color,
Mm-hmm.
we have more in common than we think we do with each other.
Right, yeah, and it has a lot to do with genotypes. With blue eyes, brown eyes, coarse hair,
Mm-hmm, it
straight
does.
hair. But as far as the nationality is concerned, when we identify a white, you're right. Like it's not identified with Irish, Dutch, Greek, Italian. In order for you to be white, you still carry some sense of pride for a certain nationality. It's like there's the Irish parade, but as far as being black, the only problem with being black is that black and African American, at least to me, is two different things because being African American, meaning you come from Ghana, you come from Senegal, you come from Nigeria, and now you are here in America. You are an African American. Whereas being black, especially coming from slave ancestry, you don't have any
Right.
idea of who your lineage is. So, when black people refer to themselves as being black, it's almost like referring to themselves as a lost tribe.
Yes.
Because we
See,
don't say that black people are when you see someone from Nigeria or South Africa or Kenya, we don't consider them as being black. Even Obama, I never really considered Obama as being black. I considered him as being African American because he knows his father's lineage. He knows his father is from Kenya. He can speak the language. He has an understanding of his father's nationality. Whereas most black men in America don't know that. They can't go that far back because there's so much that has been wiped out. You know.
no, you're right. You know what I found? I was tracing some of my ancestry, and you know one of the things I found the best place for to find like a lot of the African American, they need to ask, call Ellis Island, and
Ellis
have
Island.
them send, yep, and that because anytime, a lot of them came over in the early days of the country.
Mm-hmm.
They came over with the English, with the French, or with the Spanish.
Yeah.
And when they came over, they weren't really considered slaves. They were considered the help. So the help came with the family to the new country. And I thought, the problem is we don't teach our children history.
Oh yeah.
We teach them what they think they should know.
Oh yeah.
And most of the time, it's not the history.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll tell people, I did a portfolio once on kids in summer, and I don't care whether they were African American, whether they're Caucasian, and I don't like using the word white. I'll use Caucasian.
Yeah.
And it's actually the proper word is Anglo, but that's beside.
Anglo.
But it's so much that they did, and I love teaching African American history because they don't talk about it. The one that talked about it the most was Glenn Beck, and they made sure they got him off the air. They didn't like him educating people.
Yeah.
And I said, like the American Revolution, there was a gentleman who was African American, an American, and he was an excellent cook. And so he meandered over into the British camp and said he was looking for work, and they hired him as the cook. And this gentleman, awesome guy, it's because of him that the American Revolution was probably a year and a half shorter than it normally would have been. Because he would go and he'd make dinner or he'd make breakfast, and then they'd go out and fight. So at night, they would set out the whole battlefield of what they were going to do the next day, all the strategics. And so after everybody in the British camp went to sleep, he went back over to the American camp and gave them all the plans. And the British could never figure out how the Americans were one step ahead of them. They never did figure it out.
Wow. And this was all during the American Revolution.
American Revolution. And he is credited in history when we can teach it. He is the one that probably cut the American Revolution War at least a year and a half shorter than it would have been.
I'll have to read up and find out who that guy was.
Yeah, and I can't remember the name. The pictures you see of George Washington crossing the Potomac?
Mm-hmm.
The gentleman that was sitting right behind George Washington when he was standing was an African-American man. And nobody knew that was and George Washington didn't really consider them slaves, but that was his head person. He was the navigator of the boat. We don't teach our children that either.
So I know John Adams wasn't fond of having slaves. I know that. And I know Thomas Jefferson had slaves.
Oh, yeah.
But George Washington, I was always under the impression that he had slaves as well.
Yes, he did. And they all worked his plantation. In fact, I found out on my dad's mother's side, on that family line, that it's called the Stone Bull House. It's in Orange County, New York.
Yeah.
And they had 2 slaves. And we think they're brother and sister, but they were never treated like slaves. They were always treated as part of the household. And when we lived in Tennessee, down the corner from us, down a ways, we lived in public housing. In Tennessee, if you're a single parent, you're not going to afford anything in Nashville.
Wow.
Or even up to Franklin. And it was a flower day, and the flower shops out there in May, there's one day where they will give you flowers if you want to give them to people. So I took my kids and we walked and we gave them to people. Most of them that lived in there were African Americans. And we got to this one lady, and she was 101, 104, somewhere in there. And she was the granddaughter of a slave. And she said, "Do you want to know about my life?" And the kids and I thought, this is so interesting. And so one of my kids said to her, "So did you have to call the man whose house you lived in master?" And she goes, "No." She said that the family we were in, he believed that he was not their master. He was their guardian from God to make sure that they got through this life to be healthy, well-kept, and educated. And that blew me away because I had never quite heard of it like that. But she said that they would cook, and they were the dining room, and then the kitchen was the room next over. Well, when the family was eating, except those that were serving, all of that other family, all of the help, were eating at the same time. And she said that when his kids went to school, he brought a tutor in to teach the African American kids.
Okay.
But he took his role as being guardian very seriously. And she gave me a whole new perspective of something, again, it's not in the textbooks. And it should be.
Oh,
she
yeah.
was cool. I'm sure she's gone now, but she had more stories, and once, and they were after dinner or in the summer. The kids all intermingled. And if he bought his daughter, she said, dresses, he also bought a different style or a different color for all of the other children, the African American children.
Brand new dresses for the slaves, huh?
Yep, she said when he would go into what she called the 5 and 10. and if he did that, or his wife would buy bolts of cloth
Mm-hmm.
to make clothes, she made them for all of the children.
Those would have been, rare stories as well, because I know, even with you can this with when it comes to alcohol, when there's a law just saying that slaves aren't allowed to read and write, for instance, it's against the law. So a lot of these slave owners back then, they were under the impression that, well, even if they were nice and modest to their slaves, it's still against the law for them to learn how to read and write. So, they wouldn't do it just based off of, the fact that educating slaves, they might run away and cause problems on another plantation. So I know it was prohibited. It was strictly forbidden. Whereas now, we can't fathom black people not being able to read and write, or African Americans not being able to read and write. That's absurd. But it was law. I mean, just a little over 5 years ago, there were laws that stopped African Americans from eating at the same restaurants or drinking from the same water fountain with other races.
It's asinine.
But
it was asinine.
if it's a law,
she said that they were told you can't tell anybody that you can read and write.
Mm-hmm.
And the teacher that would come out for them was sworn to secrecy. And I thought, here is a family who did the right thing.
Yeah.
And it's like my 4-year-old grandson. His dad was deployed in the Navy when he was born. And I worked with Tyler every day. By the time he was 2, this kid could do the whole alphabet and all the sounds that went with the alphabet. And he could count. And by the time he was 3, he could do more. We were doing addition. We used trucks. But, I don't care how we got the concept in. And, it was just like, any kid can do this. Any kid. And when I taught first grade, I proved it. I taught the kids, and it was a mixed class. You have 1 plus blank equals 4. And we're supposed to know this because we've memorized tables, right?
Mm-hmm.
1 plus x equals 4. And I taught them the second half of first grade how to find x. And you know what? Every one of them got that concept. And some of them, when they got to high school, called me and said, you know what? I'm glad you taught us that, because then when we got to algebra, it wasn't a new math.
Yeah. The things are easy for kids to learn as long as you can you can understand their comprehension level. Some people need learning to be fun. Some people can understand the logistics of how you put it out there. But with a lot of kids, as long as you make learning fun, they'll catch on to it. I taught a lot of science to my nieces, at the young age. They're not even in 5th grade yet, but some of the things that I teach them is on a grown-up level. A lot about biology. Like I was going over one question with an older niece because she had issues with her homework learning the digestive system. So I helped her to understand it while teaching my 6-year-old niece how the digestive system works at the same time. So they both were able to understand it, one on a high school level and the other one at an elementary level. They were able to get it. So when my 6-year-old niece, when she gets up in high school, like, she'll automatically know how the digestive system works. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a matter of taking the time when they're younger, giving them the real basics, and then they don't stumble. But you have to take the time.
Mm-hmm. And in a lot of things in the African American communities, we learn a lot about a lot about American history. But in order to take an African American history class, it's always like an extra course, like an optional course, after school course or something like that. Especially if you're going to the standard public schools, they may have one sentence saying that African Americans were slaves, and slavery ended in 1865 with the Emancipation Proclamation. And then, it tells you then Martin Luther King led the Civil Rights Movement. It doesn't tell you anything in between that black men and women were sharecroppers, that a lot of these black people moved to the north. They don't tell you about some of the establishments that they started, like Tuskegee Institute by Booker T. Washington. They don't tell you about Marcus Garvey. You know, it just skips slavery and it jumps all the way to the civil rights movement and Martin Luther
That's
King.
right.
And yeah, it's like, wow. So a lot of black youth, they don't really appreciate the culture. They embrace things like the hip hop culture, but they never embrace the struggle that black Americans have gone through to even pave the way for a lot of other immigrants who are here. You
Mm-hmm.
know, and that's
Oh,
what
you're
frustrates
absolutely
me.
right. Well, you know what? I taught American history one year,
Mhm.
and the assignment for my whole class, and I didn't care where they came from,
Mhm.
that once a week on Fridays, you guys all had to pick somebody that was of minority descent who contributed to this country.
Mm.
And there were like 28, 30 kids in this class. And I said, and you cannot duplicate. And they would say, well, there's not enough people. I said, there's a lot more than you know.
Oh yeah.
But that we are going to find out in this class.
Oh yeah.
And so finally one day somebody said to me, I'm having a hard time. And I said, look to the music industry.
Hmm.
And they never thought of that. And so that Friday when she came in, you know who she had?
Who?
Chuck Berry.
Okay. Yeah. Rest in peace. He just passed away.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes. And I thought, you know, and then all of a sudden, instead of just looking for things like maybe inventions or whatever, they had to broaden out. And we ended up with architects and music people and theater,
Mhm.
all kinds of things. And they had thought